truly a pleasure to welcome him to Informed Immigrant to give us the latest on the DACA program. Luis, I'll let you, say a little bit about, all the expertise and everything that you bring to the table with your mad lawyer skills.
Right. Thank you so much, Juan. I'm glad to be here, and I'm very much looking forward to answering everybody's questions. So my name is Luis. I am a lawyer, and I work primarily in immigrants' rights cases. And so throughout the year, not only am I working on individual DACA cases, so I do represent DACA recipients trying to apply for the first time, well, now trying to apply for the first time, or renewing. And then I've been involved in the DACA litigation out on the West Coast. We represent the Garcia plaintiffs. And then when the case made its way up to the Supreme Court, we joined Karen Tumlin in her Batalla Vidal plaintiffs, and we joined forces and really advocated. So I'm very excited to be here, and I'm very excited to be here with Juan. We haven't met in person. We met virtually. We joke around. We send a lot of memes back and forth. But one day, once this is all over, we'll get to hang out. But so I'm excited to answer everybody's questions as much as we can. I will say, and I think as you all might know, we might not be able to get into the nitty gritty of your personal case. I can't give you legal advice through here, but the idea is to try to give you kind of a broad sense as to where we are, try to answer some common questions and concerns, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, and I think that that's very important. I always try to remind people that join us that, number one, I am actually not a lawyer, despite the fact that I do know a lot about immigration policy. It's kind of rubs off on me after working on this issue for 15 or so years. So yes, absolutely. Like Luis said, this is not considered legal advice. We'll try to get, to some of your questions in the broadest of terms. But as a reminder, before we kick, the program off, informedimmigrant.com, viable resource in English and in Spanish over at inmigranteinformado.com. And we have obviously a plethora of resources in there. If you need legal help or need, community resources, I encourage you to visit the website. We have a directory right there where you can essentially find local help to your area that's either low cost or no cost at all. Again, that website is informedimmigrant.com. Luis, a lot of things have happened between in the past couple of weeks. And when I say a lot, I mean like in terms of seismic shifts to the DACA program have occurred. And there's a lot of people either applying for the first time or who, like, you and I may have had questions the first time that when we were applying to the program. I came here this age, it says this on the website, I says this date, or I don't have this particular receipt or piece of paper, or I didn't have a bank account. Can you tell us essentially what has happened in the past number of weeks, and why is it so important for people to be aware of?
Yeah, so one of the things that happened in the last few weeks, thanks to the Batalla Vidal case in New York, is that the court order finally is forcing USCIS to accept the initial DACA applications. Now, the difference between like what happened with the Supreme Court to what happened now is that in the Supreme Court essentially said that the way that the Trump administration tried to get rid of the program was unlawful. They skipped a bunch of steps. Essentially, they did it wrong. And so if they wanted to end the program, they needed to do it the right way. And so the DACA program really should have started back then until they finished it the right way. The problem is that they didn't restart the program right away. So that's its own set of problems. But then they actually tried to end part of the program. And again, they didn't do it the right way. And so at this point, the court just said, not only is your like another attempt to end the DACA program, that's wrong for all these legal reasons, but no more waiting around. You got to start the program, and you got to start it now. And you have to do it the way that the program was enacted in 2012. So none of this 1-year work permits, no new, not just renewals, new applicants have to come in through. So the full program was forced to go into effect. The other really big part of it is that the court made clear that they didn't want USCIS to mislead any more people. They said, fix your website, do it right, put the announcements out there. And so the court was very concerned about the way that USCIS was trying to confuse people, the way that it had the website. So it also ordered them to, kind of get their act together. So those are the kind of big shifts that happened. And I think one of the biggest questions that I've gotten is, well, one, how do I know if I'm eligible? And then if I think I'm eligible, like, what are some of the things that I think I need? What do I need, like the documentation to prove? So maybe we'll start there, and we'll take it from there. So
So before you list that off, because I think it's important for people to obviously understand that, there with all the changes that have happened, and if you paid attention to Luis, it seems like a lot, but the problem is that because of the legalese that sometimes happens, and because of the inconsistencies of USCIS in terms of updates to their website, and it's just a matter of how the government has been rolling in the past 4 years. There's definitely a joke somewhere in here into the leadership over the Department of Homeland Security, but that's for another program and for another time. Obviously, the DACA program has been in existence for now over 8 years. And a lot has happened in the past 4 years where people were essentially shut out of the program and wondered whether or not they were going to be willing to gain access to it as well. I remember myself, and I'm sure Luis, you can speak to this as well, in terms of like acquiring that amount of information that the program requires you. Now, we'll walk through this as quickly as possible. Just remember that whether or not some of this applies or not apply to you, you should, if you feel the need for additional questions, either send us a DM, or like I mentioned to you earlier, visit informedimmigrant.com, where you can find a local organization that can potentially give you further assistance. So Luis, without further ado, please tell us how, essentially, if I'm a DACA recipient applying for the first time, what should I know? What should I have on hand? And how much evidence should I present to USCIS? Because there's definitely a sizable chunk of paperwork that needs to go along with this information, with this application, should I be applying for the first time.
Yeah. So in terms of, one of the things one of the questions that I get a lot in terms of just eligibility is, I think it's around dates and ages. And so maybe starting there, the program was announced in 2012, on June 15th, 2012. And so that date is very important. Because you have the first kind of question that I get is, I'm over 31 now, like, does that matter? So it's worded a little funky. That's why it is really frustrating. But essentially, what the requirement is in terms of the age is that you have to have been under 31 when the program was announced on June 15th, 2012. So if you're over 31 now, that's okay, so long as you were under 31 on June 15th, 2012. Now, I've gotten some questions like, oh, I was just over 31, or I just turned 31. Does that count? It's a pretty hard and fast rule. So if you were under 31 on June 15, 2012, you're good. If you were over 31, even by a day, then, you got shut out of the program, and we're working hard to try to get you included in another program, or, as the things are developing. But one of the things that the June 15th, 2012 date looked at is they wanted to protect individuals who were here for at least 5 years already as of that date. So that's where that June 15th, 2007 date comes from. We have to show as DACA recipients that we've been living continuously in the United States from June 15th, 2007 up until the time you apply.
And when
now,
you say, and not to cut you off, but when you say continuously, can you just break down in the nitty-gritty, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, it means that you intended to live in the United States essentially in perpetuity. You intended to just be here. And so I will say that there are some cases, and I've worked on some cases, where some people left the United States and came back, and that doesn't automatically cut you off. There's this thing called a casual, brief, and innocent departure, meaning that if you left the United States for like a short period, or a period of time, how long that is can vary, you went for a specific purpose, and then you intended to come back, sometimes that doesn't break your time. And so I've had clients who, as kids, their parents took them back, like in 2009, 2010, to visit sick relatives, and they were there for months, and then they came back. They were still eligible to qualify for DACA because they didn't intend to leave permanently. They intended to come back. They went to go do something really quick, and so if you have some breaks from 2007 until now, I wouldn't say that you're not eligible. You really kind of have to take a look at it. But but otherwise, you have to just intended to have lived here in the United States from June 15th, 2007 until now. And again, because so much time has passed by, first-year applicants are going to have to collect a lot of paper in order to show that you've been here. Now, in terms of what evidence you need, I guess we should start with what is it that USCIS is really looking for, and then we can work backwards from there. USCIS really just wants to know that on a more likely than not basis, that what's more likely than not that happened, that you've been living here throughout those years. And so there's a few things that you can show with that. For example, a really common one, and actually a really simple one, is if you were in school during that time and you can show your grades of first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, trimester, semester, whatever it is, then it obviously shows how long you've been here. Even if you got not that great of a grades, you still have to show up to get a D, right? And so the grades don't matter too much, but what does matter is how long you were actually there. And so if you aren't in school or weren't in school during those times, then it's not like you have to show something for every single day. You really have to just show something from the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year. And then they can just infer that you were been here this entire year. So something from January, February, March, then something from maybe May, June, July, and then something from maybe October, November, December, bank statements, bills, tickets, whatever it is that you got, that would work as long as it has your name on it and as long as it has a date on it. Now, one of the things that won't count in order for presence, if you're trying to show that you've been here, is declarations from other people. USCIS won't take those. So if you have nothing and then you're like, well, I can have someone write me a letter, they won't pay too much attention to that. What they do want to have is anything with your name on it, with a date on it. If you have kids, a lot of the time your kids' stuff has your name on it. And so that could work too. So really anything that you can think of as your name on it and a date from the beginning of the year, then the middle of the year, then the end of the year, you do that from 2007 onward, then you should be good to collect all those years.
And I pasted here and I pinned it on the comment section, a guide that we offer on our website at informedimmigrant.com, where you can essentially take a look at everything that Luis just mentioned as a recap, and make sure that you take a closer look at the documents that USCIS will, certainly accept, and those, that Luis just highlighted here as well. I wanted, to kind of also take a look at the time. We're kind of approaching the halfway mark of our program, and there's a lot of questions in here. We just covered, for those of you who may be joining or coming in, into the program, we just spoke about first-time applications. Again, there's a link at the bottom that's pinned in the comments. I encourage you to take a look at all the information about how to apply, or if you already are in the program, how to renew your DACA, and all the information is readily available for you. We took the time to take out all the legalese and just break it down into plain English for you. So again, feel free to send us a question via the comments, or if we don't get to it, just send us a DM and we'll make sure to get back to you. Luis, there's a lot of things that essentially we covered in the first half of our program in terms of court decisions and the past year in terms of legal challenges that the DACA program has faced. Obviously, the Batalla case lifted, or basically took away the impact that the Wolf memo, or this piece of paper that the government tried to push through in order to assert that the program had to be weakened or essentially shrunk into a 1-year interval. Now that that is gone and people can renew and can continue to renew and apply for the first time, there's also a lot of questions and some hesitation that we're seeing about the future ahead, right? Some people who are at the verge of renewing are asking themselves the same question that people are applying for the first time are asking themselves, which is basically, I have read in the news that the battle for keeping DACA alive is not done, that there's still one court out there in the 5th District out in Texas that still has to rule on the legality of this program. Maybe I am someone who's about to renew, and I'm not sure what the impact of this ruling is going to have. Maybe I'm a first-time applicant. I'm a little bit hesitant about whether or not I should apply, pending what this judge is going to say. What essentially is this case, and what could be the impact on the program and the people who are applying either for the first time or renewing, the 3rd, 4th, or 5th time?
Yeah, so there's a case out of Texas, and it's trying to approach DACA in a different direction. One of the things that has been fought up into the Supreme Court, the Parole case, is whether the way that they took away the program, whether that they did it the right way or not. But the question that has not been answered yet is DACA legal to begin with? The Supreme Court on purpose left that question for another day. And so that question about whether DACA is legal to begin with has yet to be answered in a court. And most signs point to yes. It's something that we argued over and over again, but it hasn't really ever been, courts haven't touched it yet. And so that's what the Texas court is doing, is that they're deciding whether DACA is lawful to begin with. And so if the Texas court rules against DACA and says that the program is unlawful, I assume that it's going to go all the way back up potentially to the Supreme Court. And so ultimately what it could mean is that the entire DACA program goes away for everyone. What that's going to look like, I don't know. Like, does that mean that everybody's work permits is suddenly invalid? Does it mean that they just get to ride them out? It's unclear, but it is still something that is being litigated in the court, and it does jeopardize the entire DACA program potentially. And so that's kind of what we're looking at in the Texas court.
Should people feel confident about applying for the first time if, knowing this information that you're telling them? Should they renew? What's the advice here?
So, I mean, I think you could look at it two ways, and I think there's no real right answer, but I'll tell you kind of the way I think about it. So I'm a DACA recipient too, and so I think about that too, right? Like whether to apply and what the risks are. I think, okay, if I don't apply, then I don't have anything, and so I'm at risk of deportation because I don't have anything. If I do apply, then I probably will get it if I'm eligible. And while it's getting fought in court, at least I get some of these basic building blocks of life, a work permit, a social security number, and in the meantime, I'm protected. And so even if the program goes away later, I have something now, and it's better than nothing. And I also think that if the program does go away for sure, then at least what has been talked about is that DACA recipients are going to continue to be a low enforcement priority. And so it doesn't seem super likely that they're all of a sudden going to start enforcing all these put people in removal proceedings. So particularly under a Biden administration, I don't think that that's the case. I also, there's also a lot of talk about potentially having a pathway to citizenship. And it could be a situation where if you have DACA, that might streamline you faster for a pathway to citizenship if you're already eligible. So weighing all that out, and I know it's a bit risky, you're giving the government all your information and it might go away, and that's a reason not to do it. But weighing all that out, my advice would be to apply. I think there's a lot more benefits to applying than not applying. And I think if you don't apply, you run the risk of losing out on a potential benefit. And then also you're still at risk of deportation in the meantime. And so I think that you should apply, even though the program is not on super secure grounds.
Amazing. Thank you for that. I'm taking all your questions. That's why I keep looking down at this iPad to make sure that I'm answering them and teeing them up here with Luis. Luis, there's a couple of kind of very simple, rapid, kind of like a rapid round of questions in here in terms of, one of the users in the chat essentially posted a question that says, I have a friend who has 2 DUIs, not felonies, and has paid his dues, etc., can this person apply to the DACA program?
Yeah, that's a great question. Criminal history definitely needs to be looked at closely. The answer is that if he was convicted of a straight up DUI, then no. A DUI disqualifies you from the get. But here's one thing to consider. There's a lot of people that get charged with a DUI, and then the conviction at the end is something different, like reckless driving or negligent driving. That happens a lot. Or in California, there's a thing called a wet and reckless. And so even though you get arrested for a DUI, it doesn't necessarily mean that you got convicted for a DUI. And also you might be able to get it expunged, which helps with DACA. But if it's a straight up DUI conviction and that's what you got, then the answer is no, you can't apply.
Amazing. Thank you for that. We have another one in terms of adjusting your status. You know, I think you kind of touched on this for just a second in here, but in terms of if I have DACA, can I adjust my status into potentially opening up a pathway to becoming a green card holder and later U.S. citizen? You know, what exactly does that look like? I hear that some people have to leave the country, some people have to stay in the country. You know, I know myself, you know, have a little bit of a hard time understanding those logistics. You know, can you kind of shed like some light into what exactly the process is, and for, you know, obviously for those who qualify, and what that would look like?
Sure. So if you have DACA, DACA by itself won't lead for you to get a green card. You have to get it through somewhere else. Someone else has to petition for you, whether it's like a company or whether it's a spouse or a family member. And there are 2 ways that someone can get status. One of them is you have to like leave and go to the consulate and finish it there. The other one is called the adjustment of status, where you do it inside the US. And it gets a bit tricky, but where I start is, how did you enter the United States? That's the first question. If you entered what's called, you know, lawfully, then generally speaking, you can do it in the US. If you did advanced parole, that counts. And so that's the starting point. Now, there are some people with very limited exceptions that entered without a visa who could still adjust status, but that's definitely the exception rather than the rule. If you entered without a visa and that's all you've had, then the likelihood is that you're going to have to at least finish the process at the consulate. Again, there's a few exceptions here and there, but that's kind of where my starting point is. So if you have DACA and you're looking for a petition and you're thinking, what is probably what's going to happen? Ask yourself, how was my last entry into the US? Was it with or without a visa? And if it was without a visa, then you probably would have to go. If it's with a visa, then you could, or with some sort of, you know, permission, then you could do it in the United States. And you can find that out right in the beginning when you're consulting with somebody. But that's how I would start it out.
Absolutely. There's a question in here that I just popped into the screen. I'm assuming this refers to the benefits, not faves. If my benefits or my DACA has been expired for the past 3 years, do I have to reapply, or can I try to renew it? You can actually renew it. You know, there's nothing barring you, even if your EAD or your driver's license or the benefit altogether has expired. There's nothing preventing you from actually renewing. The fact of the matter is that you were admitted to this program once, and unless something drastically has changed in your qualifications or in the requirements that you have to meet set forth by the program, you should be okay. They're really like, and that has been true, you know, even since the Trump administration had to shut down the program the first time in here. There's a couple of additional questions in here that I just wanted to make a note of. Renewals, a lot of questions about renewals and timelines, specifically about timelines. I got to tell you, and we covered we've talked about timelines and how long it takes to wait for a DACA decision. I'll just use myself as an example very briefly, and I'll kick it over to you, Luis. But like, I sent in my renewal for DACA, you know, in a panic, because I wasn't sure whether or not the Supreme Court was going to rule in our favor or against us. So I just decided, you know what, I'd rather just do it immediately. So I sent it back in February. But what I come to understand is that USCIS will not look at that application now after winning at the Supreme Court and all the other legal like challenges that we have won up until this point. They won't look at that application unless it's within the 150-day window. So if you find yourself waiting and saying, hey, I applied back in January, somebody told me to apply because that wasn't the case, and you still haven't heard back, it's coming. I just got approved 2 days ago. Last time we were live with Karen Tumlin, I had not gotten approved, and I mentioned that. But, you know, make a note keep checking, and it's coming. I've seen people getting, a batch of people getting approved in the past couple of days. If you have recently applied, know that, they're still sourcing in applications. I don't know if Luis can tell you better or not about the timeline. There really isn't a good measuring tool in here to tell you where exactly in the process you are once you've submitted your application. But the last thing is that I want to make this clear, or kind of shed some light into this, because it's actually something that I'm actively working. And I just saw a message pop into my email about a case that I'm working with. If your DACA is close to the expiration date and you have not heard anything, and by I mean close, I don't mean a month. I mean like your DACA is expiring next Saturday and you have not heard anything and you're starting to panic, make sure that you give us a contact. Make sure you contact either your lawyer, a local organization, or preferably, immediately contact your member of Congress, specifically your U.S. Senate office, whether they're a Republican, whether they're a Democrat, whether they're independent. In some cases, those folks and their offices are equipped with caseworkers who are able to call those agencies directly and inquire about your case. It takes a little bit, but the results and the way in which they're able to communicate with those agencies is probably better than going or trying any other route. You pick up the phone, you call the senator's office and say, hey, I'm a DACA recipient. They definitely know what you're talking about. That I need help. I haven't heard back. Please help me. And they'll walk you through the process. It's safe. It's confidential. If you have not heard about your DACA renewal, or you're close to expiring, I extremely encourage you to try this route. Luis, timelines. What can you tell us? How long do people have to wait? What should people be looking forward to? How long is it taking? Anything that you or you have seen in your work lately?
Yeah. So, I think for renewals, they, before the Wolf memo, we were getting them back like in 2 to 3 weeks from applying. And we were seeing that like lightning fast. After the Wolf memo came out, we saw them just kind of hold on to them, and they were waiting for that kind of 150-day window. And so now it looks like they're wanting to process them a bit faster again. What we've seen varies quite a bit, but we've seen some of them be granted within like 2 to 3 weeks after we submit them, so long as they're within the 150-day range. And some of them take a little bit longer, maybe about 2 months. But it's been around that range that we've seen. But I 100% agree that if you haven't heard anything and it's expired or it's going to expire very soon, contact your local representative. They will call USCIS and put pressure on it. And that oftentimes works.
Great. All right. We're almost up to our time here. Quick set of questions. Let's go about it. Texas case. When do we expect a decision about the next challenge down in the Texas case that we spoke about?
Yeah, there's a hearing on December 22nd, which is this Tuesday. The Texas court will have a hearing about the constitutionality and legality of DACA. Judge Hannon is probably not going to make a decision then. He was just going to hear the case. And then we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. My sense is that with the holidays and stuff coming up, that we either will get it, if I had to guess, right after the new year, sometime in early January is when we would get the decision. But it's entirely possible we would get it before the new year if Judge Hannon has already been working on, what he thinks is the result.
If a person is unable to pay or afford the $495 fee, what should they do?
Reach out to organizations. There's no fee waiver for DACA. There's very limited exceptions. Essentially, if you're like homeless and like don't have any resources and maybe like some real extreme situations, but even then it's not for sure. So reach out to organizations. Honestly, too, like I wouldn't be afraid to like start a GoFundMe. Like people will help. People will help, and you'll be surprised. A few dollars here, you get to $495 pretty quickly. So I would say, hustle in that way.
Absolutely. And I'm actually just encouraging someone to start that off. And I can't tell you how many of those have helped meet their goal via my Twitter account. So definitely works. Definitely. And those of us in here, we're willing to lend a hand in making sure that you get the, the reach that you need. I submitted my DACA application. We talked about it, timelines. If you submitted, as far as last week, unclear when you get a response, you'll definitely get a response. I encourage you to take a look at the website. Can a DACA recipient apply for a U visa?
A U visa is for people who've been victims of violent crimes and there's a police report about it. If you're a DACA recipient, you can certainly apply for a U visa if you fit that criteria. And so what will happen is that you'll just have your DACA while your U visa is pending. U visas are taking forever right now, like 5-6 years or something like that. And so they're taking a long time. So yeah, you can renew your DACA while your U visa is pending.
All right. Advanced parole. What should people know about applying for advanced parole? Say that I've never done this before. This is one of the original benefits of the DACA program that, was essentially shut down for quite a time, but now it's back. I'm considering advanced parole. What should I know about it? I heard that there's some fees attached to this.
Yeah, so when you apply for advanced parole, you're asking for people, the U.S. government, to allow you to come back after you've left. And so it's under 3 categories: either the educational category, humanitarian, or for employment purposes. The most oftentimes the ones that we see is the humanitarian one, because the educational one, everybody's online, and employment, everybody's working from home. And so it's the humanitarian one. And so there is a fee associated with it. I think it's like 500 something. I actually haven't seen it recently, but it's about $500. And essentially you have to show that you have to go to wherever it is that you're going, for one of those reasons. And if you're doing humanitarian basis, then, make sure to have it documented.
That's $500 on top of the DACA fee.
On top of the DACA fee, that's right. Here's the concern I would have about advanced parole, and right now, is that they'll give it to you for a certain period of time. So let's say you tell the USCIS, I only need to go for 3 weeks, visit my grandma. And then you go, and that government shuts down. There's no flights out of there because of COVID stuff. That happened. It happened to Colombia. It happened to Guatemala, where the airports just closed until September. And so even like people were just stuck there. Legal permanent residents were stuck there, couldn't leave. There was no flights. And so if that happens to you and you're stuck outside and there's no flights out of there, and it goes past your advanced parole, then you're stuck. And so that traveling while there's COVID makes me very nervous about that. Now, if you're going through Mexico, that's a bit easier because you might be able to travel through, land and get that way. But if you're traveling further than that, advanced parole might not necessarily itself be the problem. It might be the logistics of COVID on the way back.
Got it. Thank you so much for that. We have a question about somebody who essentially recently got approved and renewed for the DACA program, but unfortunately the card came in for just 1 year instead of 2. What should they do? Yeah. How they can get that mitigated now that the program is back to 2-year increments?
Yeah. So if you have a year work permit because you got it while all this like craziness was happening, you don't need to do anything. This is what will happen. USCIS is going to send you a notice saying, hey, you got a 1-year work permit. You're going to get a 2-year one. And then USCIS by itself is going to issue you one that's good for 2 years. What the court said is that they have to give it to you at least 30 days before yours expires. Now, they could give it to you way before, or they could wait until last minute, until 30 days before it expires, and it has to be issued to you by that time for an additional year. But you don't need to do anything. You just need to chill. Make sure you keep your address updated with USCIS, and they'll start sending you notices, and then they'll start sending you the work permit that's good for the 2 years. And so long as they do it before 30 days of when it's supposed to expire, 30 days before, then you're going to be good. So you don't have to do anything. They'll do it on their own.
You want to take an additional step. We talked about here with Karen Tumlin multiple times about DACAclassaction.org. It's a website hosted by the National Immigration Law Center and a couple other organizations. And I did not see the name of the user who popped that question in here, but if you have a 1-year DACA card and you have questions about how to essentially get it renewed, just hear what Luis said, but also make sure that you go to the website and you fill out that form. Information is confidential and secure. National Immigration Law Center will try to go to court with USCIS, back to court and to USCIS to demand an immediate fix. But in the meantime, Luis has mentioned here that you're perfectly fine, but we want to make sure that we, in the worst case scenario, we are able to contact you as well. And by we, I mean legal services and providers like the National Immigration Law Centers, a trusted partner of ours here at informedimmigrant.org. let me see. How long does it take? We talked about timelines. We do not know when first-time applications are going to be mitigated. If it's in the system, it's in the system. I can tell you from experience, my first DACA applied in September. It did not come into February. So the best thing that you can do, fire up that old, Game Boy that you have and play some Tetris, because it's probably gonna be some a matter of months, and definitely not days, and definitely not weeks, unless something extraordinary happens out there at the USCIS land. We talked about DUIs. This question has come in a number of times. If you have been convicted, you are not eligible to apply for the program. If you have had the DUI expunged from your record, then you are able. If you're waiting, to determine what exactly, whether there will be a conviction or not. I'm not quite sure, Luis. If they're waiting on a conviction, what should they know?
Yeah, I've seen two things. Apply to renew if you have a pending conviction or a pending charge that needs to be resolved. I've seen it one of two ways. I've seen USCIS grant while it's still going. And then, if it leads to a conviction, then you're going to get a letter later. And I've also seen USCIS issue a request for evidence saying, hey, we know that this is ongoing. Let us know how it ends, and we'll give you a certain amount of time. If you're not done with it by that amount of time, let us know. We'll send you another request for evidence. And so then it'll prolong your situation. So I've seen it both two ways, but if it's ongoing, and your DACA needs to be renewed, go ahead and submit it. Here's the other thing too. If you're working with like a public defender, or if you're working with like a criminal defense lawyer, let them know that you have DACA that's about to expire. I have friends who I went to law school with who are prosecutors, and they're very sensitive about DACA recipients, and they do what they can to make sure to not mess up your DACA status. And so, let them know for sure. There's a lot of people willing to help. I was surprised how many prosecutors reach out to me and they say, hey, there's a DACA recipient. He got into a little bit of trouble. She got into a little bit of trouble. I don't want to mess up their DACA stuff. What can we do? And, first, stop getting into trouble, y'all. But if it happened, let your lawyers know. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of good people working in government too, not trying to mess this up. So let them know and go ahead and apply and renew if it's still pending.
All right, we're way past our time in here. I'm going to close it out with one question in here in terms of I just saw it here. I just want to go back here to December 22nd about what's going to happen here. Judge Hainan is a federal judge down in Brownsville, Texas. Within the Fifth Circuit, who is going to have a hearing on December 22nd about the legality of the DACA program. His ruling on the DACA program is expected sometime between as early as December 22nd all the way into the late phases or days of January 2021. We're unclear when the ruling will come down and what the ruling will say. However, in the meantime, we continue to encourage you to look into the application process for DACA. If you are able to renew. If you're able to apply for the first time, apply for the first time. Know the following. 1, if Judge Hainan rules negatively, or that means against the DACA program, there is still another ruling in conflict over the Second Circuit over the Batalla case, and we've talked about this at length. That means that in between those two processes, it's likely that this case, and Luis touched on this, that the case will go back to the Supreme Court, and then we'll have to have another exercise at Supreme Court Instagram Lives to inform you about the latest. However, we encourage you to take this time, continue to pay attention. We'll keep you informed here on informedimmigrant.org. The first thing that we hear or that we see, rest assured that while we may go out on break and enjoy the holidays with our families or with each other because we're social distancing at home, it does not mean that we're not paying attention, and we'll make sure to keep you informed, every step of the way about every single development. So leave the worrying to us, and we'll be sure to give you the latest information. Luis, appreciate your time, my friend. We said half an hour. We went over for 10 minutes, but at the same time, I think that the information, obviously information is power, knowledge is power, and I think that folks in here continue to come into these programs, to make sure that they get the latest information from us. So from us here in the East Coast, all the way out to you in the left coast, we really appreciate you.
Right. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much, Juan, for hosting. I am very lucky to be able to work with you all, and I hopefully we can get together soon.
Absolutely. Look forward. Again, for everybody watching, make sure that you visit informedimmigrant.org. If we did not get to your question, feel free to hit that message button and send us a DM. One of our team members will get back to you with the information or point you in the right direction so you can get trusted information that you can apply to your case. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.